Hello everyone, and welcome to Andrew Broussard Watercolors. This is the first experiment in a series of experiments on Legion Stonehenge Aqua black watercolor paper. Try saying that 10 times fast. I just got my initial video out of the way of just talking about the paper itself, and now we're going to play around on it. This is a 10 by 8.5 sheet that I tore and cut. And with this first experiment, it's going to be taking the hake brush, saturating the paper, and seeing how it handles white gouache. Now, the gouache that I'm using is our Da Vinci brand. I'm a big fan of Da Vinci watercolors, and most of the gouache that I have is Da Vinci. If you've used this paper before, let me know what you think in the comments. And let me know what materials you like to use on top of it. Now, the first initial interesting thing is this. Wetting it, I could see what areas are super saturated and what areas are partially saturated. I'm not sure if those nuances are showing through in the video, but in person I could see those brush strokes. Now, we'll see how it buckles and how that compares. With the Stonehenge Aqua itself, it handles the water saturation very well. My board isn't perfect for getting those binder clips on there, but I'm doing 8 by 10 for experimental purposes to kind of drag the packet out. And also, I talked about the sizing in the previous video, how it's not conventional. Or at least for me, it's not conventional. So we'll use our white gouache. We'll create imaginary scene. Now, one of the unfortunate things is that using gouache, we don't usually use that on the watercolor, especially in that first stage. So gouache is going to be more opaque, and it's going to be less finely ground as watercolor. So that is another variable that's being introduced. So we have two variables at once, which in science you don't want to do. The way it flows in that wet and wet is really beautiful. I think the drying shift that we'll look for later on will depend on both the paper and the pigment as well. So this is the kind of wet and wet tonalist technique that I like to utilize. It's derived from the oil painting videos of Stuart Davies, where we're letting the scene create itself. If I had just slightly longer binder clips. Okay, everything's pinched down now. We'll see how it handles paper towel for lifting. So here we have that dark. Let's see how well it goes back to that. Okay, initial reaction and idea. When we wet the paper, it's going to appear darker, just like watercolors when wet are going to appear darker. When we lift out that spot and pull the moisture out, it's actually going to lighten that spot up. So that's what just happened right there. So that's interesting. The next is pulling out pigment. Let's see if we can get back to the white. Now remember, sorry, to the black. Now remember, this is gouache compared to what we traditionally use in these videos. Initial pulling back to nothing doesn't seem to happen. Let's scrub a little bit. Yeah, we're able to wipe back completely, looks like. Okay. We do get a very nice softening though, so this will give, hopefully, good sense of depth in our final image. So I'll go back and I'll pull out some background areas. I wonder if this paper would help with learning water control, because of the fact we can see very plainly how it's wet here and dry as a bone right there. Let's pull these out and we'll go back and forth. We'll play around with scraping to see how it handles scraping. Some watercolor paper doesn't handle that well at all. Others handle it really well. And you're welcome for stating the obvious. Now, I will say this. It's no secret that this looks like a snow-covered scene. So nighttime snow scenes would be really easy to do. And we're getting to that time of year where people are moving from autumn painting scenes to winter scenes. I will tell a quick cat story. Now that the cats are allowed back in the art room, there is a box that has camera parts in it, because I've been doing the camera stuff. And on top of that paper, on top of that box, I had put paper I had treated for future art processes. And Harrison is in said box, and yesterday he was in said box on top of said paper. I'm not mad at him or anything like that, because he's a cat and I know he likes boxes. But that paper is going to make a debut in art experiments in future videos, since it has some cat scratches on it now. All right, let's grab the #1 rigger. We'll use our approach. I am catching a little bit of pink here, because on my gouache palette, I was using some pink at some point, or mixing some. Now, one of the potential negatives, obviously, is that this might be restricted to specific mediums. So unless you have a white gouache or a titanium buff, you might not really have anything that would work on it. We might see what colors will show up on it, because we do have opaque watercolors, or watercolors that lean towards that. But that's a that'll be an experiment for another video. By the way, let me know in the comments what experiments you would like to see. Let me know which white gouaches you prefer. We are getting a little bit of spooky feel from this. Which we could push this towards nighttime scenes, Halloween scenes, Christmas scenes. So it does have a place in a specific fields that can take place with it easily. The metallic paints, the iridescent paints would work well over it. I have an iridescent medium, we can do a video with that. A lot of different options. Wet and wet, it does seem to spread very easily. I'm not sure if that's a property of the gouache. Let's set that brush down. Okay, let's come in with a thicker concentration. This will give the snow on a tree type feel. Okay, so we are building up some good tonal variety. Let's pause for a second while I help Hammy. Okay, I'm back. All right, now card wise and scraping wise, we'll explore the sharp edge, the round edge, the flat edge, and we'll see how things look. Sharp edge. Usually this will dig into paper and it'll create a backfill and a dark line. Here it's backfilling and creating white lines. Okay, let's do our rounded edge. Rounded edge pushes it a little bit more, but it falls back in a lot easier. So rounded edge will give a wider line and bring us back to the dark in some spots, but it really does flow back very easily. Okay. It's reminiscent of one of the masters of the golden age of illustration, Sidney Sims, I believe is the pronunciation, S-I-M-E-S. This is our flat edge, which we use for rocks and roots. It's harder to scrape, I think. I'm applying quite a bit of pressure. And like I said, we do have two variables here. We have the fact that we're using gouache and the fact that it's a new paper. Let's see, pull those down. Okay. Other texture making devices that we have is the razor blade. So I'll use the razor blade in a bit. I don't like using wet and wet razor blade. It doesn't seem to quite work that well, so I'll wait till it dry off for there. We could do a little splattering to see how that'll look. We used our hake. We aren't having buckling issues, which is great, especially with just a slight grip that we have. So that's good. Okay, let's pause this and we'll do a dry off. Okay, so I didn't perceive too much of a drying shift, so that's nice. Let's come back in with stronger pigment. This is a lot stronger white gouache. Attempting to create a foreground now. And I would think at this point, the main property that we're testing is more the gouache. I don't think the paper would have too much of an effect. Now that we're drying and applying in this fashion. I don't paint snow often because, surprise, I live in Louisiana. I did grow up in New York, though, on Long Island, and we'd have a lot of snow. And it was great as a kid. I was talking to my uncle yesterday, and he was talking about snow blowing and how miserable it is. Okay. So after this application, we'll play around with the razor blade. Struggle with getting a fine line. This is the #1 rigger, by the way. I think that the next experiment will have to be watercolor over this paper. Whether or not it shows up and just how the brush interacts and just the texture effects and how it feels. The results may not be good at all, but I think we'll have a lot to learn there. I went to Stony Brook, and we had just a beautiful campus. And when it would snow, there'd be just fields of just white. And walking on fresh snow and that sound is very pleasing. And just going and exploring, it's just so nice. Let's see if we could scrape anything back. So the pointy end really is not, there we go. This is a drier area. Now we're getting some effects. So you can get some texture, but it's not the best. So that means we'll have to try out the razor blade now. So let's do a dry off real quick. All right, now that we're somewhat dried off, we'll try razor blade effect. Obviously, be careful because you're working with a sharp edge. And if you're young, make sure you have your parents' permission, parents or guardians. So this is flat scraping. For the subject matter, it's giving a pleasing effect. And I think this would be a really good tool. You probably use it for different representational textures. So I'm pretty much just pulling back to the paper. How much damage to the paper I'm doing, I'm not sure. We pulled up a piece here. Yeah, that's fine. We would do the same thing with regular watercolor. Now, there's a few other types of motions I like with the razor blade. One's a pulling one, where it's a slight cut for a long line. And here, it gives thin black lines, it looks like. So it's cutting with the edge and pulling towards you. So you're creating just fine cuts in it. I don't usually use it that often in watercolor painting, but it's a different effect that you can get. So hopefully that's showing up. Going in on an angle, helping create branches. You can see you can open it up a little bit and close it. right. Now, another razor blade technique is to kind of pick at the paper. And with regular watercolor, you'll pick back whites, and you can get little effects as if there's little flowers. Here, it works. It pulls back to the black. What we can use it to represent, I'm not sure. Maybe little silhouettes of leaves or something on top of the previous. So the razor blade is working very well with this. Okay, the last mark I could think of with the razor blade would be to drag that edge. Now this is going to kind of skip over the paper, and it's going to create a texture like that line right there. That's what I'm assuming, or at least how it works in regular watercolor. It digs in quite a bit. And so if you need to pull back to black, that's pretty convenient for branches. Let's see. I think that's everything for the razor blade. Let's play with splattering just to see how that looks. And splattering in white gouache is fairly common in watercolor painting. Looks nice. I feel like we should paint somebody in this scene. We could have scraped back to black and had a figure in black. That would have worked pretty well. We could maybe make a statement and do a figure in black and then a figure in white. Why don't we try that? Where did that razor blade go? There it is. We'll have this figure going to meet a black figure. I'm just pulling back, just picking the shape out. And let's cut a long staff. So whatever spooky, Halloween-y connotation you want to take from these two ghastly figures, feel free. Okay. And I was going to take white for the shadow. But let's just pick out a black shadow here. So we've got a white shadow coming from the one and a black shadow from the other. And we could give this one a white staff. So fantasy scenes would be pretty interesting just with these limited tools. A tube of gouache, black watercolor, razor blade, the card, etc. We can play around with one more. Let me see where we're at. We're at 24 minutes in. I think, yeah, let me pause for a second. I was debating using melanin foam. Melanin foam is magic eraser. It's just, that's the kind of general name. You can buy these in bulk, excessive bulk, online for $10 or less. Magic erasers themselves are pretty pricey if you buy them individually. If you go to a dollar store, you could probably find them pretty cheap as well. I'm going to find a corner. Oh, it dripped water on it. So I wet it a little bit. I'll see how it does with scrubbing back. And then pulling up. Okay, so the melanin foam works great if you need to erase back to the original black of the paper. I didn't really want to play anywhere on the scene with it, but melanin foam works good. There's no chemical additives. It's just a abrasive, so it's rubbing back to it. You're not supposed to use this on cookware or anything like that, but melanin foam is pretty strong stuff. Very effective. Let's sign this with a jelly roll. We'll go down in here and we'll put a mat over it to see how it looks. This jelly roll ain't rolling the way we want it to be, but we'll see. We do a dry off. I am very pleased with the lack of warping of this paper, and it really did seem to handle some rough approaches. Overall, I like it so far. I'm really excited about the other experiments that I can do with this. I'm very, very excited. Let me know what you would like to see down below in the comments. What type of materials you want me to experiment, what type of subject matter. I'll do what I can. I'll see what I have on hand. Please like, subscribe, follow. You're welcome to follow along with any one of these videos, and please feel free to share and tag me in the results. You have my express permission to sell anything you do when you follow along with one of these videos. That being said, please consider supporting the channel. I do have a Patreon link down below. I'm going to start posting the pictures for download on the Patreon as well. Some people are saying that it's easier to follow along with that download aspect. Y'all have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon.